Another couple of seconds. All right, so the hangout is live.
Okay.
Um, as with the last one, feel free to take charge and just do push this one however you want to do it. I've got all my notes in front of me, and I'm ready to just chat death proof. I liked what you did with Jake. Like, what was the first time you saw this? Like, what's your experience with it? And we can just pretty much go from there.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll get started. Welcome to Bad Movie Brunch. I'm Katie here in Los Angeles. Once again, my usual co-host Luke Taylor of Chicago is currently out filming his feature film Break. As I said last time, it's a fantastic coming-of-age movie centered in Luke's hometown of Canton, Illinois. It's romantic, it's charming, it made me tear up. So if you want to support independent film, please donate to Luke's Patreon. Now, once again, with that said, of course, I have another guest co-host this week. I'm very excited. Care to introduce yourself, sir?
Hi, I am Tom Hush. I am the host of the NoCo Cinema podcast on WGNradio.com and also the producer and engineer of this show, Bad Movie Brunch.
Yeah, you are. It's good to have you on board, sir. So you picked this movie. Tell me a little bit about it.
All right. So I decided that for my inaugural episode of Bad Movie Brunch, I would choose Quentin Tarantino's lowest rated, worst received, but possibly best film, Death Proof from 2007, part of the double feature Grindhouse, package that came out in theaters with Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror, and it's his sixth feature film. Stars Kurt Russell, Rosario Dawson, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and Zoe Bell, and a few other surprises. But this is a movie that a lot of people really don't like. I think it's fantastic, but it's interesting. I wanted to bring this one up because of the recent developments in Quentin Tarantino's life and career, and also the Me Too movement in Hollywood and the things surrounding him, and kind of re-examine this movie under a different lens. Because especially it's over 10 years old now. It turned 11 this year. And I still think it's a movie that is a lot of fun to watch and possibly one of his most entertaining.
Well, that was a winning introduction. It sounds like you have some history with this film. Tell me about your first time watching it.
So this is actually the first Quentin Tarantino film I ever saw.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
A lot of people start out with like Pulp Fiction, especially Reservoir Dogs, things like that. But I was hanging out at a friend's house. I was staying the night at his house, and he had Comcast On Demand, which was a luxury that I did not possess. And we decided to go searching through, like, okay, what can we get on demand? What can we get for free on demand? And they had Death Proof on there, and I had heard about it. I'd watched the trailer for it, and I knew it was part of this Grindhouse thing. And I said, okay, well, this guy's supposed to be super cool. You know, the name Quentin Tarantino was known to me. I was like, okay, this guy is like some sort of big shot. So why don't we watch this? And we decided, we went for it. And my pal really hated it. He hated every minute of it. And meanwhile, I was in love. I was like, I have never seen a movie like this. I didn't know movies could be this insane. And it got me to go down the rabbit hole. And frankly, for better or for worse, I would probably list Quentin Tarantino as my favorite filmmaker. And I think Death Proof had a lot to do with it.
Wow, that's high praise.
I know. For a movie that is problematic and, not so well regarded in the Tarantino canon, it really got me into his world and introduced me to a much larger idea of what cinema could be.
Wow, that's fantastic. I did not have such a powerful experience as what you had.
Very few
I
people do with Death Proof.
No, well, it's just that, but I did see it in very interesting circumstances. I went to undergrad in Austin, Texas.
No
So
way.
yeah, I did. I went to St. Edwards, part of this movie begins with them driving on South Congress, and I went to school at the top of the hill, and UT is at the bottom of the hill. So I'm very familiar with some of the things, some of the locations that they pass by, because I used to walk down that street.
Totally.
So I was introduced to it freshman year in the common room of the Basil Moreau Hall dormitory. And I'm just getting to know all these people. I've already introduced them to the room, so I'm not allowed to pick a movie ever again. And but it brought us all closer together, and we all sat around and we watched this movie. And I remember finding it very entertaining and very interesting. I had seen a couple Tarantino movies before, but I liked this one because I was able to follow it, even though it did something different in terms of structure.
Right. Isn't it weird that for a movie that is literally told in chronological order, it's his only movie he's ever told in chronological order with no flashbacks, no sort of messing around with the timeline, that this feels weird. Like, you watch Death Proof and you're like, hold on, this is strange. I'm watching a Tarantino movie and he's not trying to mess with where things are or surprise me. It's literally told straight through.
Except in the sense that the first hour is a completely different set of girls than the second half of the movie. That, I think, is what's different with the structure. That it's not like there's no 3 acts about it. It's a first half and it's a second half.
Yeah, it's very Full Metal Jacket, if that's a good comparison.
I think so. And I think it works. I wasn't like gunning or hoping that it would be anything different. I think it totally stands on its own.
And that's what I think I really like about it, is that despite being a movie that is very much in the Tarantino, I don't know, aesthetic, it feels so independent from everything else because it is just so nasty and like it's such schlock compared to what he goes for. Because I feel like Tarantino is the missing link between the kind of grindhouse B movie, like not intentionally bad, but just kind of like turn off your brain sort of thing, and the high art. Like, he combines he combines like exploitation cinema and Jean-Luc Godard. That's like that was like his dream. And Death Proof is the first one I saw, or, you know, despite being the first Quentin Tarantino movie I saw, it's also the only movie of his that really just veers in the exploitation.
Well, wasn't that the whole point of this movie?
Yeah, and that's the sad part, is that it's looked on so poorly, especially because people talk about Pulp Fiction, about how it's like one of the greatest movies ever made, and his other movies as well are they're held in extremely high regard. But this one is just kind of like, yeah, it's okay. And I'm like, no, dude, this is like so spot on. And I feel like the many critics and many viewers didn't get really what he was shooting for because they don't have the cultural context for that B movie schlock. Like, by the time this comes out, 2007, most people, I mean, maybe they don't really realize that they're watching B movie schlock, which has been elevated to the level of the Hollywood blockbuster. But you know, Quentin Tarantino, to get a little bit biographical, his mom was a single mother, and she would see a lot of guys. And when she was at work, she would ask these guys to take care of young Quentin. And what they would do to basically like both entertain themselves and this kid was take him to these sleazy, nasty cinemas where they're showing like, you know, the most gross exploitation style stuff. And that's just where Quentin Tarantino got his world, you know? And I feel like those kind of second run or just grindhouse cinemas literally don't exist anymore. It's the AMC. Everything you go to is nice and clean, and everything is very put together and very much like the standard cinema experience. And this harkens back to an era where there were the nice theaters, and then there were the crappy places where you could go see, I don't know, Sweetback's Badass Song for like 25 cents. And it was like, that was a day out at the movies. Or you could go get a double feature for $1. And I think that's what I really like about this movie, is that at least for the first half, it totally encapsulates that idea.
So you think this is considered, from what I'm gleaning from what you're saying to me, you think this is considered to be his worst movie because it's schlock, but it's schlock that harkens back to schlock that people might not be familiar with when they were watching it.
Yeah, it's a really difficult movie in terms of Quentin Tarantino has said himself that this was his worst movie to make. Now, some people have, there's different interpretations of what he meant by that. But I think this was his worst movie to make because he was going for such a specific thing. And I think Quentin knew right off the bat that there were just going to be a huge audience of people that did not get what he's shooting for. This kind of intentionally bad, in a sense, even though I really don't think it's bad at all, but he plays into tropes. He purposely damaged the film that he shot this on. He shot this movie on 35 millimeter. And then in order to achieve that grindhouse nasty look, they just dragged those negatives through the dirt. They just totally damaged them on purpose. And I think in 2007, there was just not enough people who understood that he wanted it to be a movie that you turned your brain off for. But the Quentin Tarantino fans wanted something more intelligent, something more like a Pulp Fiction, where you could get multiple interpretations. It's like, oh yeah, we got to patch together the timeline, man. We got to, watching Pulp Fiction definitely made people feel smart, even though it's not that complicated of a movie. This movie is dumb. It is dumb as hell. And that is the point. I mean, just even in the plot itself, it's two groups of women that are hunted by a charismatic stuntman named Stuntman Mike. And he's got a death-proof automobile, and it's just a riff on that, mid to late 60s and 70s grindhouse cinema. That's all it is. Now, I have some interpretations of it. Whether or not that was Quentin's intent, I don't know, but it's a very interesting movie to watch now in 2018.
Interesting. I do think Quentin Tarantino's oeuvre is really fascinating in the sense that he's a film nerd's director, that he just has all this love of, and he pulls from different things. Like this movie is very much one way in its approach, but usually he pulls from a whole bunch of different sources.
Right.
And this was pretty purely grindhouse. And I do think he was trying to have his cake and eat it too, in the sense that it was an exploitation film, but he also wanted to have these strong female characters that he usually tries to put in his films. And of course, the natural ending was going to be that the only person that could defeat this evil, misogynist, obsessed with killing women with his stuntman Mike, is strong, badass stunt women. And he just has this long, extended, choppy, kind of indulgent, but also he wants you to like it, that they're just beating the crap out of this guy. They probably kill him at the very end. He does get kicked right in the face.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Rosario Dawson probably landed that finishing blow.
Oh yeah, no, Stuntman Mike is dead. Like, let's get that out of the way for everybody. If you haven't seen this movie, Stuntman Mike dies. You want him to die, though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I think Stuntman Mike is a really fascinating villain, especially because in this most recent watch, I noticed that he's really not the only villain that's lurking in this movie. He's he's the biggie. He's the big bad guy that, you know, he actually commits the murders. And what murders they are, Katie. They are, for out of all murders, these are some pretty spectacular murders.
He's very proud of them. He like stops the film to like show you the different ways that the murders happen.
Yeah, doesn't it feel so weird that it's like almost like Stuntman Mike is in control of the death scenes, like from a meta perspective. Like you get to see how when he actually kills off that first group of gals, which really made me sad because I mean you grow to love them in just 45 minutes. It takes 45 minutes to actually get to any action realistically.
Yep. He does like he's a Kevin Smith in that he does like to have the conversations that go nowhere.
Yes. And it's so much fun because
they are fun. I like them.
Yeah, it's, you know, people get on Quentin Tarantino because he has very stylized dialogue, but you know, one, you are watching a movie. Like people don't, you know, if you want to see someone have realistic conversations, watch a Linklater, because Linklater is the king of the like very realistic dialogue, almost off the cuff improv. But Quentin Tarantino likes to have characters that you want to, I don't know, you kind of want to be them a little bit. You wish you were that snappy. You wish you were that, you know, witty and all that. Yeah, confident, all that kind of stuff. So the conversations that go nowhere, that's what builds the character, if you ask me, because it's not in the aim of advancing the plot. You're just kind of finding out what these girls are like. But Stuntman Mike, yeah, he's basically in control of that first half of the movie, and you can feel it. You can.
Oh, for sure. And then when he loses control, oh boy, does he lose control. And it is fun to watch. You mentioned the Me Too movement early on, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on how that relates to this film now.
Yeah. So it's kind of strange watching this movie because there's so many elements of the Me Too movement within it. One, you have Quentin Tarantino, who is implicated in a lot of that stuff that happened with Harvey Weinstein. It also came out that he nearly killed, you know, at the very least, nearly paralyzed Uma Thurman on the set of Kill Bill Volume 2 with a stunt in a car that he was told it wasn't safe, and he still went along with it, and he basically felt, you know, he didn't take responsibility for it, which is weird because we're talking about a movie where a stuntman kills people with his car. I don't know. And
also Zoe Bell does that ship's mast. Like that's her doing that scene.
Right. And Zoe Bell was the stunt double for Uma Thurman in Kill Bill. And then, and I didn't even think about it until I just watched this Death Proof this most recent time. You've got Rose McGowan.
Oh yeah, yeah.
As the the unlucky first victim of Stuntman Mike, and it's just this weird confluence of things into a movie that deals with toxic masculinity and the horror, I guess, of what happens when men don't get what they want. All the male characters in this movie are very lecherous. I noticed this.
Oh, for sure.
Almost immediately in that first half. I broke down into the three types that Tarantino presents here, essentially. You've got whiny makeout parking lot guy who is almost worse than Stuntman Mike because it's like so annoying.
Yeah, and he's gonna be like, well, okay, I'm not okay. So he's emotionally manipulative.
Right.
He's talking with his buddy about how they're gonna get the girls drunk and have their way with them. And Stuntman Mike, they're setting him up to they think that he's doing the same thing that they're doing. When in reality, of course, we know that he just wants to kill them with his car. And it is, why is it just because of the thrill? Like Stuntman Mike, it has missed the thrill of being a stuntman, and the only way he can feel that rush anymore is by killing women for some reason?
That's a super good question. And it's one of the strangest things about the movie is that he really has zero motivation. He's just kind of a sexually driven psychopath
Mm-hmm.
It is funny to look at it through the lens of like he misses being a stuntman, like he's a retired stuntman. I mean, he even talks about there's a great scene where he is like explaining who he used to stuntman for to Rose McGowan's character and a few kind of just extra characters, and he's telling them all these legendary names, but they're legendary names from like the 50s and 60s. And he's just like, you have no idea who I'm talking about, do you? And they're just like, no idea. And I think that might give us a glimpse into what you've just said, that kind of like, he feels old. He feels useless when his whole identity is built around like, I am death proof. I cannot be killed. So the only way he can find that kind of thrill is through killing young women. It's so fucked up when you start peeling back the layers. Oh God.
And he carries around their photographs and calls them his girlfriends. Like part of the thrill, which is very serial killer-esque, is that he stalks them before he manipulates them into either getting into his car and killing him that way or killing them with his car. And there definitely is a setup of it. But I do think it's interesting to think of Stuntman Mike as kind of Quentin Tarantino wrestling with his own feelings about being kind of this lover of film that people don't necessarily appreciate anymore. Because this is like him trying a love letter to Grindhouse and giving it to people, but also realizing that most people have no idea what the hell he's talking about when he talks about these movies. Like, they're pretty much conversations for him and for the few people like him. Like, they're not meant for a general audience. And I do think there is a bit of him wrestling with himself and realizing that that can only go so far. Again, having your cake and eating it too, having this love letter, but also kind of commenting on how it's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's super interesting. Well, and it's funny that you mentioned Stuntman Mike as kind of the avatar for Quentin Tarantino, because as many people who follow Quentin know, it appears that he has a really weird foot fetish. And
I mean, of course,
super self-evident in this movie.
It starts on feet.
Yeah, it's just all about
the feet. On it.
I want to ask you, actually, when it comes to this movie, and with a cast of mostly women. I mean, this is a female cast, a decently diverse one, but mostly white women. But when it comes to how we view them literally in the movie, you've got a lot of scenes that focus on them as sexual objects, whether it's like the feet or specifically the lap dance, which, funny enough, was actually not shown in theaters. Really? If you watch the theatrical cut, it starts the lap dance and then it goes to this like scene removed sort of, title card.
It's kind of funny, though.
Yeah, it is funny.
Because there is that gigantic setup to it, and they're just like, nope.
Yeah, it's almost better that way in a sense. But the version that I have and the version that I see always has the lap dance sequence. So what do you think this movie says about the male gaze? And do you think that it makes any attempt to, I don't know, flip it around or expose it as a negative, or is it just yet another movie that uses women as objects?
I think this is a very third wave feminist kind of movie, and that the idea with third wave feminism is sex positive feminism. So these characters talk about sex very openly with each other and make fun of each other about the sex that they're having or the sex that they're not having and what they should do about it. And none of that bothered me because it felt like it was, again, part of their characters and it was natural. And the character that does the lap dance, Butterfly, she does it because her pride is hurt, which I think is interesting. There's this whole setup of Jungle Julia setting her up to, like, she gets kind of, the idea is that she's originally conned into it, but she's really the one that has the power and makes the decision to do it. And I mean, it goes on for a really long time. So what can you say about that? But I think it's supposed to show that these are tough gals and they are comfortable with their sexuality and they can talk about these things. But then you also have that moment where like the toughest gal of them all in that little group, Jungle Julia, is texting with her boyfriend, and she has that sweet moment where she smiles, and you can sense that it's not just about the sex. Like it's kind of like they're, I feel like they're almost like men fronting. Like when you think stereotypically of men talking about sexual conquest, but really there's like the secret kind of sweetness to it as well. I think that's what he was trying to do with Jungle Julia. And so it didn't really bother me. I'm not bothered by this movie. I'm not sure what it says I at all. I do, again, think he's trying to eat his cake and have it too. That you can both be super sexualized, but also you can take that power back into yourself. And that if somebody is sexual with you without your consent, that you can just fucking destroy them.
And well, and I that's the great thing about Quentin Tarantino, is that he's willing to make the effort to try. Whether he succeeds is always going to be up to the viewer or you know, his critics or anything like that. But you know, to take it over to something like Django Unchained or The Hateful Eight, which both deal pretty heavily with race and you know, that idea of taking the power. His thought was, specifically with Django Unchained, was he watched the series Roots, and there was a scene where one of the main characters, who was a slave, had an opportunity to whip the shit out of one of his slave owner, you know, one of the slave owners, and then he doesn't do it out of this like moral obligation. And Quentin Tarantino's feeling on it was, and this is for better or for worse, he felt that, of course, he's like, no, that doesn't feel realistic. Of course he would have whipped the fuck out of that dude, because that's what people do. You know, revenge can be sweet. He does not subscribe to that old Klingon proverb that it's best served cold, or like that you have to dig 2 graves. He's like, nah, dude, revenge is awesome. This is how people get back, and like fighting back is a good thing. Now, if you want to agree with that or not, that's totally up to you. But that's how Quentin Tarantino approaches pretty much everything.
I will say this about the dialogue between the female characters, and I didn't really realize this until we started talking about it. It didn't feel to me, and I really think this is a big win. If I'm watching a movie and there's a whole bunch of women talking, and it doesn't, and if I don't have a moment like this feels like it was written by a man. Like, I never had that. And I mean that in a bad way. Like, this is how men think that women talk. Like, it felt natural and fine to me. I bought it. I bought that was what how these group of gals talked. And it passes the Bechdel test. Because they also talk about cars and movies and Jungle Julia's career.
Yeah, that's like the huge thing, is that these girls are big shots, specifically Jungle Julia. Like, these, you know, it sucks that I love both groups of girls in this movie, but the first group is just like, it kind of sucks that we are in a slasher, so someone's got to go, just by virtue of the movie, and maybe the message of the movie being about toxic masculinity. But it's such a strong group of women, both of them doing jobs that are really awesome. Like, you've got Jungle Julia, who's a big shot radio host. You've got the second group of girls who are all actors, or, you know, in one way or another, whether it's stunt women or more traditional actors. And it's just this story of them fighting against these fucking bullshit dudes, like these really annoying dudes. And I have to go on to a sidebar here with Jungle Julia.
Okay.
Because, one, I think she is hands down my favorite. I think she is so funny and so witty. And as someone who works in radio, I like to believe that there can still be radio personalities that hold as much weight as someone like Jungle Julia. But also, she is played by Sidney Poitier. Now, her name is Sidney Poitier. That's in reference to, you know, the Sidney Poitier, who is her father.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought that was just like a gag.
No, she is Sidney Poitier's daughter. Sidney Poitier named his daughter after himself.
Good.
And I just find it
Junior.
Yeah. I mean,
that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, the only change is in the spelling, is that her father's name is spelled Sidney, and she spells it with a Y instead of an I. But I just love thinking that, like, oh man, you know, your dad was in the Heat of the Night, and guess who's coming to dinner?
It's so good. Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome.
He's this groundbreaking actor, and she's like, you know what? I'm gonna just fucking flaunt it in a Quentin Tarantino movie, and she kills it.
She's fantastic. They're all fantastic.
I got a sweet spot for Zoe Bell.
She's great playing herself.
I know, and I wish she would just be in more stuff. Like, I hope she's not trying to just be a stunt woman, because maybe it's that natural Australian charm, but she has got so much. All these women, all these actors have so much charisma behind them, and that's what makes it so much fun to see them square off with none other than Kurt Russell.
Yes.
Who is
the
just
man in this movie.
He is so Kurt Russell in this movie.
He is the Kurt Russellist.
It's so weird, because he seems to be doing a mix between a John Wayne and a Burt Reynolds impersonation.
Oh, good.
And it just works so well.
It does. And what I really love that Stuntman Mike somehow doesn't understand that when you kill people, sometimes they're going to try to kill you back. And he's super surprised and horrified when the second group of gals totally beats him up at the end. He goes, why? Like, why do you think? It's like he's a sociopath, or like completely disconnected from reality. Like, he doesn't think that his murders are real or something.
Yeah, it's a game to him. And honestly, I think potentially top 10 moment for Kurt Russell when he's sitting in the car after he's been shot in the arm, and he's just like weeping. He's wailing like a child, and he's pouring whiskey into his wound. He's just like, oh God, no. Like, I love it. I love it so much. And he just totally turns it up for this movie.
There is something, going back to the girls, there is kind of a downer thing with the girl power part, in that they leave their friend. The second group of gals, they leave one of their friends, the actress, in this cheerleader outfit with this kind of creepy guy, and then they never come back to him, at least not with what we see within the film. One of them implies that this cheerleader gal, who has no idea that this is happening, that she's part of this ruse, the guy that they take the car from, they basically imply that she'll give him a blowjob, but nobody's cleared it with her. So she's just stuck with him, and we never figure out how that ends.
Yeah, that is something that has not aged well. It's like very. I think if I remember correctly, I found it like disturbing when I first watched it. I was like, "Wait, we're just doing this? Like, is this a gag?" And the worst part is that the dude who owned, that character who owns the car that they decide to take for a test drive, he also plays a creepy dude in Kill Bill Volume 1 who rapes Uma Thurman's character in Kill Bill while she's in a coma. It's the same dude.
That Buck? That's Buck?
That is it's not Buck.
Okay.
Because Buck is the night. Yeah, Buck is the night nurse with the car, but he is the guy that Buck essentially sells Uma Thurman to, and she bites his tongue out or some shit like that, and Buck comes back. But he is like the creepy dude that and I hate to bring this up, but like rapes Uma Thurman while she's in a coma.
Yeah.
Or at least tries to while she's pretending to be in a coma. So I'm a little bit, foggy on it, but the point being, it's a really not funny gag. Even in 2007, that does not work well.
It's also weird for me because I know that actor from The Waterboy.
Yeah,
like it's just like this. Yeah, he's just this goofy dude in this Adam Sandler movie. That's how I think of him, is just this kind of comic relief character. So it's kind of disturbing for me to see him in this context.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like they definitely should have brought the actress in the cheerleader outfit along for the ride.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have left her behind.
Yeah, that does not sit super well with me. But you know, it does lead to a fantastic like 30-minute chase sequence, which is I think really one of Quentin Tarantino's achievements as a director, is making that scene work and being a fantastic chase sequence. Like, it is very much it's up there for me with something like Vanishing Point or Bullet. I'm trying to think of some of the other great chase scenes in movie. Like, it's like Smokey and the Bandit level badass. It's such a good last 30 minutes of the movie.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. And then of course they get him out of the car and isn't Rosario okay? So you mentioned that there are two stunt drivers, and that would be the Kim and Zoe Bell.
Yes.
And they also bring along Rosario Dawson, who plays a character who I believe is a makeup artist.
Yes. It's a little bit like, the thing with me in this movie is that by the time I get to the second half, especially because I've seen it so many times, I just kind of get their archetypes. So you've got Zoe Bell and Kim as like the kind of like badass chicks. Like, they are the dangerous duo that get everybody into trouble. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is sweet and innocent and wants no part of it. And Rosario Dawson is kind of in the middle. Like, you know, they've got that whole, I got to get into this Italian Vogue mini plot. Like,
yeah,
there's a whole story to be told there, where they're at a gas station and the guy behind the counter just happens to have a copy of Italian Vogue that he wants to sell to them for like $30.
Yeah, that month's issue somehow.
I mean, I don't have any context. Is Italian Vogue, is that like a big deal? Like, I guess so.
I mean, maybe with a different circle of gals, but like, I have no idea. I have no idea.
But I guess it kind of establishes a little bit of quote unquote girliness with Rosario and Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Meanwhile, the other two female characters don't really care. Like, they would not be that. They're not even part of that whole exchange. So it seems like Rosario is that middle ground where she is a little bit like Winstead, where she is not a stunt woman. She's not this hard ass kind of chick, but she wants to be. So that's what gets her in the car. She's like, hey, I can be cool. Like, I can hang out with the big kids. But of course, she kind of regrets it by the end.
I know. Okay, here's the thing about that, for two reasons. I think the reason why I brought it up, number one, it furthers the stuntman Mike as Quentin Tarantino dealing with himself kind of stand-in, because stuntman Mike licks her feet before she's able to. Yeah. Ooh. Before, while she's sleeping in the car, and then pretends that he like dropped his keys in the least smooth way I've ever seen. And oh god, it's beautiful. It's totally realistic. And so he does kind of non-consensually do something sexual to her, and then at the end, she's the one that delivers the finishing blow on stuntman Mike. The other two girls let her have it. She becomes that badass. Not only does she take back this kind of like from that pervy moment, but also she gets to be that badass that, as you were saying, she wants to be. Yeah. So there is kind of an arc to her character.
Yeah, and Rosario does it fantastic, as with the rest of the cast. She absolutely kills it. Like, I don't know where I'm at with Rosario Dawson. I feel like I've only seen her in maybe like 3 movies total that I really remember. But
dude, also like this movie, can we just really quick, Rent? Yeah. 2 gals from Rent in that car.
That is true.
Sorry, just had to throw that out there. Hey audience, what's up? Rent happened. Please continue.
No, I do want to sidebar here into a note that I made as a Quentin Tarantino fanatic. I I've always been interested as to where this fits within the Quentin Tarantino universe, because he has said that all his movies are like connected, and that there's like there's characters whose like their dads or their sons or whatever are in other movies. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly.
No, I get what you mean.
Get what I mean?
Everything fits together. It's like the Pixar theory.
Yeah, right. So like in Reservoir Dogs, you've got Vic Vega, and then in Pulp Fiction you have Vincent Vega. Like you've got like two brothers. You got the Vega brothers in two different movies. So I've always been curious, like, where does Death Proof fit? Because they have all the typical references. They reference Big Kahuna Burger, which is referenced frequently in his movies. Red Apple cigarettes, I'm pretty sure, are also referenced in this. So I've got this idea that this is a movie that the characters in something like Reservoir Dogs would watch. This is a movie within a movie universe.
Oh, that's interesting.
So like all the chuckleheads from Reservoir Dogs would go to the movies and they would watch Death Proof.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for Kill Bill as well. I think Kill Bill is a movie within Quentin Tarantino's movie universe because of one connective thing, and that is Michael Parks and James Parks showing up as the father and son sheriff.
Yes. Oh,
which is they also show up in Kill Bill Volume 1 or maybe Volume 2. They show up in Kill Bill.
About that. Yeah.
So they show up and have, like, seriously, Michael Parks, God rest his soul, I miss him so much because he was truly a gem when it came to character acting. That Tusk episode pretty much encapsulates everything about Michael Parks.
He's brilliant. I mean, he's so good in that role. Like, oh man, he makes Tusk.
Exactly. And he turns these crazy Tarantino lines into pure magic. Like, I've got this quote down here. When they're talking, him and his son, played by James Parks, his actual son in real life, they're walking down the hallway and James Parks asks him, did any of the girls survive? And Michael Parks, just like an absolute fucking G, says, shit, 2 tons of metal, 200 miles an hour, flesh and bone, and plain old Newton. They all princess died. What the hell? Yeah. That is incredible. I wish I could write dialogue that good. And I think like getting to the female dialogue, as you said, like you mentioned that it feels right and it doesn't feel super forced. And I find that really interesting because this is a super stylized movie. Especially with Stuntman Mike. I have to get this on the actual podcast.
Okay,
because I
go
think
for
this is the quote that I think sums up the movie and also hits that nice check mark of it says the title of the movie in the quote. But when Stuntman Mike turns to Rose McGowan and says, remember when I said this car was death proof? Well, that wasn't a lie. This car is 100% death proof. Only to get the benefit of it, honey, you really need to be sitting in my seat. And then just hits the brakes, smacks her head against the dashboard. I don't know what sums up this movie more. It's just, it's a tough movie, especially with all the people involved and where they ended up today, a little over 10 years later. But Death Proof, I think, gets a bad rap. And if you can't enjoy it, then I don't know what the hell is wrong with you, because you can just go watch something. Just go watch something. Go watch In the Heat of the Night, because that's definitely more. It's got Sidney Poitier in it, and 2, the OG Sidney Poitier, and 2, it's probably a lot more intelligent than this. I would double feature this with something like, like any other car movie that gets referenced in this. Vanishing Point, Smokey and the Bandit. This is like, for me, this is like watching Taken. Just turn off your fucking brain and enjoy it because it's so much fun. And I take it for all its flaws, all its male gaze. I recognize that it is a movie made by a man that has a very complicated relationship with women on screen. But Quentin Tarantino, you beautiful bastard. I love this movie. I hope that he someday recognizes his own talent when it comes to what he did with Death Proof.
And wow, that's fantastic. I myself was very excited to rewatch it since I hadn't seen it since college. And I'm happy to report that I had just as much seeing it this time, probably even more now than I did when I originally saw it, with everything in context. And it was really fun talking to you about it. So I'm so glad that you picked it.
Oh, Katie, it was an absolute thrill, to not be just editing this podcast and instead speaking on it. But hopefully Luke will return soon to his rightful throne, like Simba to Pride Rock.
Oh yes, I highly await his return. Any final thoughts?
I will say this. This. If you were going to buy this movie, get the Grindhouse double feature version. Now it's available on Blu-ray, and it has this and Planet Terror. And if I'm not mistaken, it presents them as one single continuous film. So that you get all the ridiculous fake trailers that they had people shoot, including Machete, which eventually was turned into an actual movie with a sequel starring Lady Gaga.
Bless. Good.
And Edgar Wright does a hilarious trailer for a movie called Don't. And it's just ridiculous. So I think this was a movie that it was once in a lifetime, especially for 2007. And people, for both Planet Terror and Death Proof, people didn't really get it, which is too bad, because if I had the opportunity to go see Grindhouse as a double bill with Planet Terror and Death Proof, I would sell my left leg to go see it because it is a full experience. So if you're going to buy it, get the Grindhouse version that comes with both movies, because realistically, that's how it's meant to be seen.
Fantastic. What a great closeout. Thank you, Tom Hush. Well, let's sign out. I've been Katie here in Los Angeles.
And I've been Tom Hush here in Chicago.
Awesome. Have a good night, guys. Bye.
Bye.
You can cut that out. I don't know. I never know how to finish, but it was really nice talking to you.
Oh, I hope I wasn't too verbose. I'm not going to lie to you.
No.
It was a long morning today, so I made myself a night brunch, and I had a couple of
dark
drinks. So I hope I wasn't too rambly, but nah,
man, this is a ramble fest.
Totally.
That's
Well, thank you so much, Katie, for doing a double header.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for rescheduling.
Yeah, we'll have Southland Tales out tomorrow. I think that Southland Tales one is just something else. It is some other kind of movie. It is some other kind of episode of this podcast.
Awesome.
And then we'll save Death Proof for the week following that. And then I'm going to reach out to Marissa from BBF and see if she's got time to do a quick one. If we can, she can't come down to WGN, then we can figure out. I don't live far from her, so I could always bring my setup over to her and just do it via Google Hangouts again. Because
cool.
Yeah, it seems to work pretty well. So you have a good night.
You too.
And we'll talk soon.
Okay. See you later.
All right, bye.